He deserves a real mother, not this chaos. She used her key to sneak in and build a case to take my son. So, I prepared a devastating surprise that destroyed her plan completely. Click. Clack. It was the distinct, heavy sound of a brass key tumbling inside the front door lock. The sound echoed through the quiet hallway of my home, a sound that always managed to make the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was 8:14 in the morning on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I was staring blankly at the microwave clock, waiting for my coffee to reheat for the third time. I was barefoot, wearing sweatpants that had seen better days, and a t-shirt stained with spit up from my 18-month-old son, Finn. He had been up since 3 in the morning with a mild fever, and I was running on exactly 0 hours of solid sleep. The front door swung open, and before I could even set my coffee mug down, she was already inside. Florence. My mother-in-law. She didn't knock. She didn't text to say she was in the driveway. She just let herself in like she was inspecting a hotel room she had paid for. She stepped inside wearing a pristine cream-colored trench coat and leather shoes that clicked sharply against the hardwood floor. She stopped abruptly. Right in the middle of the entryway was a small pile of colorful wooden building blocks that Finn had scattered the night before, alongside his little blue backpack. I watched from the kitchen edge as Florence looked down at the toys. She didn't just step over them. She paused, leaned over slightly, and exhaled a long, dramatic sigh. It was the kind of sigh you might let out if you stumbled upon a literal biohazard waste dump in your living room. She picked up the backpack with 2 fingers, her nose wrinkling in absolute disgust, and moved it to the side table. "Your hallway is such a mess, as always," she said. She didn't yell. Her voice was soft, carrying that sickeningly sweet tone she always used when she was about to deliver a blow. "Is it really so hard to keep it clean, Claire?" I stood there, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up my neck. My husband, Harrison, was already at his office downtown. He always missed these little morning ambushes. If I were a different kind of woman, maybe I would have snapped back. I would have told her to get out of my house and hand over the key. But to understand why I stayed quiet, you have to understand where I came from. I grew up in the foster care system. By the time I turned 18, I had lived in 9 different houses. 9 different families, 9 different sets of rules, 9 different bedrooms where I never truly belonged. The concept of a permanent family, of a mother figure, was something I craved with a desperate, pathetic kind of hunger. When I met Harrison, I didn't just fall in love with him. I fell in love with the idea of his family. I wanted Florence to like me. I wanted her to be the mother I never had to guide me, to approve of me. I am 32 years old, a professional freelance graphic designer, a grown woman who pays her own mortgage, but whenever Florence stood in my hallway looking disappointed, I immediately reverted back to feeling like a worthless, unwanted foster kid trying not to get kicked out of her latest home. So, I forced a tight smile, gripping my warm coffee mug like a lifeline. "Finn had a rough night, Florence." I was just about to pick that up. She offered a tight, unsympathetic smile. "Well, standards have to be maintained, dear. For the baby's sake." She walked past me into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the countertops for crumbs, and began opening my cabinets. And just like that, my sanctuary, the only real home I had ever known, felt like hostile territory. It didn't start out this blatantly disrespectful. Looking back at the early years of my marriage to Harrison, I can see how Florence slowly dismantled my boundaries, piece by piece, under the brilliant disguise of maternal assistance. At first, it genuinely felt like help. She would drop by on a Saturday afternoon with a baked casserole, claiming she made too much and thought we could use a free dinner. I was so grateful. I thought, this is what real families do. But then the casseroles turned into unsolicited cleaning. I would be upstairs working on a design deadline, and I would hear the vacuum running downstairs. I would come down to find Florence reorganizing my pantry. She would take all my spices out and arrange them alphabetically, throwing away anything she deemed expired without asking me. When I tried to gently tell her she didn't need to do that, she would pat my cheek and say she was just trying to take the load off my shoulders because I seemed so disorganized. Harrison never saw the problem. Harrison is 34 years old, a mid-level project manager at a logistics firm. He is a good man, a great provider, but he is fundamentally terrified of conflict. If there is a difficult conversation to be had, Harrison will find a way to evaporate into the background. I remember one specific incident vividly. It was about a year into our marriage. I used to paint watercolors as a hobby to relieve stress. I had a small wooden box of expensive, imported paints and brushes resting on a side table in the den. One weekend, Florence came over while I was out grocery shopping. When I came back, the table was bare. I asked her where my paints were, and she casually mentioned she threw the box in the outside trash bin because it was cluttering up the room and making the house look cheap. I was furious. I actually cried. When Harrison came home, I practically begged him to say something to her, to establish a basic rule that she cannot throw away my personal belongings. Harrison just rubbed his temples, let out a heavy breath, and pulled me into a hug. "She means well, Claire," he murmured softly into my hair. "You know how she is about tidiness. Don't take it personally. That is just Mom. That is just Mom." Those 4 words became the ultimate soundtrack of my marriage. It was the universal shield Harrison used to deflect any accountability away from Florence. If she made a passive-aggressive comment about my weight at Thanksgiving, "That is just Mom." If she showed up uninvited to our second wedding anniversary dinner at a restaurant, claiming she just happened to be eating at the exact same place, "That is just Mom." Every time he said it, a tiny piece of my reality chipped away. I started to wonder if I was being too sensitive, too dramatic. Maybe this was how normal mothers acted, and my broken foster kid brain just didn't understand healthy family dynamics. Harrison's constant denial conditioned me to swallow my discomfort. It taught me that my feelings of being invaded were secondary to Florence's need to control our environment. He didn't realize it, but every time he chose the path of least resistance to avoid upsetting his mother, he was leaving me entirely exposed to her cruelty. The true shift in power happened when Finn was born. Becoming a mother for the first time is terrifying enough, but navigating it with Florence breathing down my neck was a nightmare. When Finn was barely 3 months old, Harrison received a promotion that required him to travel frequently. His first big trip was a 3-day conference in Chicago. I was actually looking forward to it. 3 days of peace. 3 days of just me and my newborn, figuring out our routine without an audience. But 2 days before his flight, I walked into the kitchen and saw Harrison holding a freshly cut brass key. He was attaching it to a silver keychain. "What is that?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Harrison didn't look me in the eye. He focused very hard on the metal ring. "I made a spare for Mom, just while I am out of town in Chicago. You know, for emergencies." My heart pounded. "Emergencies?" "Harrison, I have a phone. If there is an emergency, I will call 911. Or I will call her. She lives 15 minutes away. She does not need unrestricted access to our house." "Claire, come on," he pleaded, finally looking up. "I am going to be 2 states away. What if you slip in the shower? What if you pass out from exhaustion and Finn is crying? She needs to be able to get in. It is just a precaution. It will make me feel better." I argued. I pleaded. I told him it made me feel profoundly uncomfortable and unsafe in my own space. But Harrison used his ultimate weapon, guilt. He painted a picture of me lying unconscious while our baby screamed, and of course, my resolve crumbled. I was a sleep-deprived, anxious new mother, and I let him convince me I wasn't capable of surviving 3 days alone. The handoff happened the next morning. Florence came over for coffee. I watched from the kitchen island as Harrison handed her the key. He told her it was strictly for emergencies. Florence smiled warmly, thanking him for being such a responsible son. Then, she opened her heavy, dark brown designer purse. The clasp made a loud, echoing snap. She dropped the shiny brass key inside, and it clinked against her wallet. She looked over Harrison's shoulder, making direct eye contact with me. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes were ice cold. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. She had won. Watching that key disappear into her bag felt like watching the deed to my life being signed away. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was the total surrender of the gates. From that moment on, the illusion of my home being a safe sanctuary was dead. The barrier between the outside world and my private life had been completely removed, and I had no idea just how devastating that surrender was going to be. Fast forward a little over a year. Finn was now 18 months old, a tiny tornado of energy learning to walk and pull everything off the shelves. Harrison's career had taken off, meaning he was now traveling at least twice a month for days at a time. And Florence's use of her emergency key had become a daily reality. There were no emergencies. Not a single one. Yet, she let herself in constantly. But it evolved from simply dropping by to something far more sinister. She became a phantom in my own house. Because I worked from home on graphic design projects, I often wore noise-canceling headphones to focus while Finn took his afternoon naps. I would be deep into a project, take my headphones off to go get a glass of water, and realize the house felt different. I would walk into the kitchen and stop dead in my tracks. The coffee mug I had left on the island was moved to the sink. The baby formula container, which I always kept on the right side of the stove, was now tucked away inside a high cabinet. A stack of mail I had left on the counter was neatly squared off, and sometimes, envelopes looked like they had been tampered with. The worst part was that I never actually saw her do it. She would let herself in quietly, move things around, and leave before I even knew she was there. Or I would be upstairs in the bathroom, and I would hear the distinct click of the front door closing. I would run downstairs, heart hammering, only to find the house empty, but the throw pillows on the couch perfectly fluffed and rearranged. I thought I was losing my damn mind. Literally. The sleep deprivation of having a toddler combined with the stress of my freelance deadlines created a fog in my brain. I started questioning my own memory. Did I put the formula away and forget? Did I move the mail? I would stand in the middle of my kitchen, gripping my own hair, trying to retrace my steps. When I finally caught her in the act one afternoon, she was rearranging my utensil drawer. I demanded to know what she was doing. She didn't flinch. She just looked at me with deep, theatrical pity. "Oh, Claire, sweetie," she cooed softly. "You left the knives out on the counter again." "I am just putting them away so Finn does not hurt himself." "You have been so forgetful lately. Your memory is just slipping away, isn't it?" "It is okay. Maternal exhaustion does terrible things to the brain. I am just here to pick up the pieces you drop." It was textbook gaslighting. She was intentionally moving my things to make me feel crazy, to make me doubt my own sanity. And it was working. I felt hunted in my own house. I started checking the locks 3 times. I started carrying Finn from room to room with me, terrified of leaving him alone in his own playpen because I never knew when the front door might swing open. The psychological warfare escalated beyond the walls of my house. I found out the hard way that Florence wasn't just trying to make me feel incompetent, she was actively trying to prove it to the outside world. It happened on a rainy Tuesday morning. I took Finn to his regular 18-month checkup at the pediatric clinic. He was perfectly healthy, hitting all his milestones, laughing and grabbing at the doctor's stethoscope. After the appointment, I walked up to the front desk to schedule his next visit. The receptionist, a kind older woman named Brenda who recognized me from previous visits, was typing on her computer. "Okay, Claire, you are all set for 6 months from now," Brenda said, handing me an appointment card. She hesitated for a second, lowering her voice. "By the way, I just wanted to let you know. Finn's grandmother called the office yesterday." I froze. "My mother-in-law? Florence called here? Why?" Brenda looked slightly uncomfortable. "Yes." She asked to speak with the nurse. She said she was very concerned about Finn's environment at home. She wanted to verify if he was up to date on all his vaccinations and asked if the doctor had noticed any signs of neglect or malnourishment during his visits. The blood drained from my face. I felt physically sick. The fluorescent lights of the clinic suddenly felt blindingly bright. Neglect? Malnourishment? What did you tell her? "We told her we cannot release any medical information without your direct consent, of course," Brenda assured me quickly, seeing the panic in my eyes. "And we noted in the file that Finn is a perfectly healthy, happy boy. But I thought you should know she is making those kinds of inquiries." I walked out to my car in a complete daze. I strapped Finn into his car seat, climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Florence calling the doctor wasn't just an overstepping of boundaries. It was calculated sabotage. She was laying groundwork. She was planting seeds of doubt with medical professionals, painting a picture of me as an unfit, dangerous mother. The humiliation burned in my chest. She was building a narrative, a story where she was the concerned savior, and I was the unstable villain. The realization of what she was doing hit its peak 2 days later when Harrison returned from a 4-day trip to Atlanta. Usually, when he came home, he would drop his bags, scoop Finn up, and kiss me. But this time, the energy was different. He was quiet, walking on eggshells around me. After we put Finn to bed, I was wiping down the kitchen counters. Harrison sat on a bar stool, swirling a glass of water, watching me with a heavy expression. "Claire," he started, his tone incredibly cautious. "How have you been feeling lately?" "Honestly." I paused, rag in hand. "Tired. Normal toddler mom tired." "Why?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I do not know. You just seem really overwhelmed lately. Maybe a little disconnected. Are you sure you are not experiencing some delayed postpartum depression? It is totally normal if you are. We can get you help." The exact words. Overwhelmed. Disconnected. Depressed. It was like listening to a ventriloquist dummy speak with Florence's voice. My heart sank to the floor. "Did your mother tell you to ask me that?" "No. No, I am just observing," he lied quickly, looking away. "I just worry about you and, well, the environment Finn is in when I am gone." The environment. Another Florence buzzword. I didn't yell. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. Later that night, while Harrison was taking a shower, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Usually, I never look at his phone. But a sick intuition told me to look. The screen lit up with a text preview from his mother. I picked it up and opened their message thread. My stomach plummeted as I scrolled up. It was a gallery of betrayal. Dozens of photos. A picture of a laundry basket overflowing with clothes that I hadn't had time to fold yet. A picture of 2 unwashed coffee mugs in the sink. A picture of Finn's toys scattered across the living room rug. All taken from inside our house during the hours Harrison was away and I was busy working or tending to the baby. Underneath the photos were messages from Florence. "Look at this mess, Harrison. I am just keeping you informed. I do not think Claire is in her right mind. She cannot even manage a sink. I just worry about the baby's environment. He deserves a real mother, not this chaos. She needs serious psychiatric help." And Harrison's replies? Not once did he defend me. He sent things like, "I know Mom, I will talk to her," or "Thanks for checking in on them, it is a lot for her." I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the glowing screen as the water ran in the bathroom. The slow poisoning of my marriage was happening right in front of me. Florence wasn't just trying to make me feel crazy. She was actively convincing my husband that I was mentally unfit. She was turning the man I loved into a witness against me. The phantom in my kitchen wasn't just playing games. She was building a solid, documented case. If you're watching and feeling outraged by this mother-in-law's appalling manipulation, please help the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and don't forget to leave a comment with the name of the city you live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. Now let's see how Claire will fight back in the next episode. The tension in our house finally reached its breaking point during the week of Thanksgiving. Instead of a quiet holiday, Florence insisted on hosting a massive Sunday family lunch at our house. She framed it as a beautiful family tradition, inviting 12 people, including Harrison's older brother, his judgmental Aunt Carol, and a few extended cousins. She didn't ask me if I wanted to host. She simply told Harrison it was happening, and he, as always, agreed without consulting me. I was terrified. I knew this wasn't just a family lunch. This was a home inspection on a grand scale. For 48 hours straight, I transformed into an absolute machine. I scrubbed the grout in the guest bathroom with a toothbrush. I wiped down the baseboards in the hallway. I organized the coat closet so all the hangers faced the exact same direction. I cooked a massive roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, and a complicated lemon tart for dessert, all while keeping an 18-month-old toddler entertained and out of the way. I was running on adrenaline and a desperate, pathetic need for validation. The foster child inside me was screaming that if I could just present them with the perfect home, the perfect meal, and the perfect smiling face, Florence would finally accept me. I thought that if the house was spotless, she would have absolutely no ammunition to use against me. Sunday arrived. The family poured into our home, bringing with them loud voices, heavy coats, and bottles of wine. Florence arrived last. She walked through my front door wearing a sharp white blazer, looking less like a grandmother and more like a health inspector. I watched her eyes dart around the living room, scanning the pristine coffee table, the vacuumed rugs, the perfectly arranged throw pillows. For a brief second, I thought I saw a flash of disappointment in her eyes that there was nothing to criticize. But she quickly masked it with a bright, tight smile. The lunch went smoothly at first. Everyone complimented the food. Finn was behaving beautifully, sitting in his high chair and giggling at his uncle. I remember looking across the table at Harrison, who was laughing at a joke his cousin made. For a fleeting moment, I let my guard down. I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. I had survived the inspection. I had proven myself capable. But I was so foolishly naive. I didn't understand that Florence hadn't come to inspect the present. She had come prepared with the past. The plates had been cleared, and I had just brought out the lemon tart and the coffee. The dining room was filled with the low hum of relaxed conversation. I was pouring a cup of decaf for Aunt Carol when the room suddenly went completely quiet. I looked up. Florence had stood up at the head of the table. She tapped her silver fork against her water glass, a sharp, ringing sound that instantly commanded everyone's attention. She looked around the table with an expression of deep, manufactured sorrow. "I just want to say something," Florence began, her voice quivering slightly with fake emotion. "We all love this family so much. And we all care about little Finn more than anything in the world. But sometimes, love means making difficult decisions and having hard conversations." My stomach dropped to the floor. A cold sweat broke out across my back. I looked at Harrison, but he was staring intently at his napkin, his jaw clenched tight. He knew what was coming. Florence reached into her large designer purse and pulled out a thick, manila envelope. "I have been deeply concerned about the conditions in this house for months," she said, her voice dripping with artificial pity as she looked directly at me. "I have tried to help Claire. I have tried to support her. But the reality is, she is simply not coping. She is overwhelmed, unstable, and the environment she is creating is not safe for my grandson." Before I could even open my mouth to defend myself, Florence opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed photographs. She handed the first few to Aunt Carol, who gasped, and then passed the rest down the table. I didn't even need to look at them closely. I knew exactly what they were. They were the photos she had taken using her emergency key. The overflowing laundry basket from 3 weeks ago. The unwashed mugs in the sink. Finn's toys scattered on the rug. But taken out of context, printed on glossy paper, and handed out like evidence in a courtroom, they looked damning. They looked like the home of a woman who had completely lost her grip on reality. Silence swallowed the room. The only sound was the shuffling of the photographs passing from hand to hand. I felt the collective weight of 12 pairs of eyes staring at me, judging me, pitying me. I looked at Harrison, silently begging him to stand up, to take the photos away, to tell his family to get out of our house. But Harrison did absolutely nothing. He just sat there, looking confused, overwhelmed, and completely paralyzed. He abandoned me in a room full of wolves. "I think we need to seriously discuss what is best for the baby moving forward," Florence said gently, placing a comforting hand on Harrison's shoulder. "Sometimes, a mother just needs to step aside and let capable people take over." That was the moment. That was the exact second she revealed her true hand. She wasn't trying to embarrass me into becoming a better housewife. She was publicly laying the foundation to take my son away. The humiliation didn't make me cry. It didn't make me scream. It did something much worse. It made me go completely, utterly numb. I calmly set the coffee pot down on the table. I didn't defend myself. I didn't yell at Florence. I just stood up, smoothed down the front of my dress, excused myself politely to the table, and walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hallway, went into the guest bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run. I leaned against the sink and stared at my reflection in the mirror. I was expecting to see the terrified, unworthy foster girl crying back at me. But she was gone. The girl who desperately wanted Florence's love had died at that dining room table. In her place was a mother. And you do not threaten a mother's child. I splashed cold water on my face and dried it with a towel. The shaking in my hands completely stopped. My mind became terrifyingly clear. Florence wanted me to come out of this bathroom screaming like a lunatic. She wanted me to throw things, to sob, to prove to everyone at that table that I was emotionally unstable and entirely unfit to parent. She wanted a reaction so she could label me crazy. I refused to give her the satisfaction. I realized that arguing with her was useless because she wasn't playing by the rules of a normal family argument. She was treating this like a legal battle. She was collecting documentation. She was building a narrative. If she wanted a war of evidence, I was going to give her one. But I wasn't going to fight her in the open. I was going to fight her from the shadows. I took a deep breath, unlocked the bathroom door, and walked back out into the house. I survived the rest of the afternoon in total silence, cleaning up the plates while the family awkwardly whispered in the living room. When the last guest finally left, and Florence walked out the front door with a smug smile of victory on her face, the real work began. The very next morning, Harrison packed his bags for a 3-day business trip to Denver. He tried to apologize before he left. He stood in the hallway, looking miserable, and mumbled something about how his mother just worries too much and that we should probably just hire a maid to keep the peace. I looked at him with absolute indifference. I told him to have a safe flight and closed the door behind him. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, my plan went into motion. I didn't waste a single second crying over my broken marriage. I picked up my phone and called a professional security company. I told them it was an emergency and paid double their usual rate to have them come out that exact same day. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the old deadbolt on my front door was gone. In its place was a sleek, black, high-tech smart lock system. It required a specific digital code to open, and every single time someone attempted to enter a code, successful or not, the system sent a time-stamped alert directly to my phone. Florence's little brass key was now completely useless. But locking her out wasn't enough. I needed to document her intrusion. I had the technicians install 2 discrete, wide-angle security cameras. They weren't completely hidden, but they were subtle enough to blend in. One was mounted in the upper corner of the entryway hallway, pointing directly at the front door. The second camera was positioned in the living room, capturing a full, unobstructed view of the kitchen, the dining area, and the staircase. When the technicians left, I stood in the middle of my living room and opened the security app on my phone. I watched the live feed of my own house. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the crushing weight in my chest lifted. I finally had eyes on my sanctuary. The castle was fortified. The invisible ghost that had been haunting my kitchen could no longer hide in the dark. The cameras were my sword, but I also needed a shield. Florence was trying to build a paper trail against my mental health and my parenting, so I decided to build a stronger one. On Tuesday morning, I strapped Finn into his car seat and drove straight to his pediatrician's office. I sat down with Dr. Evans, a serious but kind man who had been seeing Finn since he was born. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told him clearly and calmly that my mother-in-law was threatening a custody dispute and was making false claims about Finn's living environment. Dr. Evans listened intently, checking Finn's growth charts. After a thorough examination, I asked him to draft a formal, signed letter. I needed him to explicitly state that Finn was in the 99th percentile for growth, perfectly healthy, showing absolutely zero signs of neglect, and thriving in a stable, loving environment. He printed the letter on official hospital letterhead, signed it, and handed it to me with a reassuring nod. But I didn't stop there. I knew Florence was pushing the narrative that I was suffering from severe postpartum depression and mental instability. So, on Wednesday morning, while Finn was at a brief daycare session, I voluntarily walked into a licensed clinical psychologist's office. I paid out of pocket for a full, comprehensive mental health evaluation. I sat in a leather chair for 2 hours answering questions, taking written assessments, and explaining the systematic gaslighting I had been enduring in my own home. At the end of the session, the psychologist handed me a certified document confirming that I was fully oriented, mentally stable, exhibiting no signs of clinical depression or psychosis, and perfectly capable of managing my household and child. I went to an office supply store, bought a bright red binder, and carefully placed the medical clearances inside protective plastic sleeves. This red binder was my armor. Every single life Florence had spun was now legally and medically contradicted by certified professionals. I had my defenses ready, but I still needed the smoking gun. I needed absolute proof of her ultimate motive. Fate, it seemed, decided to hand it to me on a silver platter later that Wednesday afternoon. Florence dropped by unannounced, completely unaware that the locks had been changed because I happened to be standing in the front yard pulling weeds when she pulled into the driveway. She smiled her fake smile, walking past me into the house, carrying her large leather purse and her silver iPad. We sat in the living room while Finn played on the floor. Florence placed her iPad on the coffee table. After about 10 minutes of making passive-aggressive comments about the state of my garden, she excused herself to go use the upstairs bathroom to check if I had scrubbed the tub. She left the iPad on the table, and the screen was unlocked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew it was a massive invasion of privacy, but we were way past playing fair. I lunged forward and grabbed the device. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I didn't look through her photos. I went straight for her email app. I hit the search bar and typed the word Finn. A draft email popped up. It was addressed to a prominent family law firm in the city. The subject line read, "Custody consultation regarding unfit daughter-in-law." I stopped breathing. I tapped the draft to open it. It was a long, detailed message. Florence had written out a complete timeline of my supposed mental decline. She referenced the photos she had taken of my messy house. She explicitly stated her intention to file for emergency grandparent custody on the grounds of severe maternal neglect and psychological instability. She even mentioned that she believed her son, Harrison, was too weak to protect the child and needed her to intervene. Tears of pure, white-hot rage pricked my eyes. She wasn't just trying to bully me. She was actively plotting to steal my baby. Moving faster than I ever have in my life, I hit the share button, selected AirDrop, and sent the draft document directly to my own phone. A small checkmark appeared. I deleted the transfer notification from her screen, closed the email app, and placed the iPad back on the table in the exact same position she left it. Seconds later, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. I picked up a block and handed it to Finn, my expression completely blank. She walked back into the room, grabbed her iPad, and announced she had to leave. I watched her walk out the door, knowing with absolute certainty that this was the last time she would ever leave my house under her own power. I had everything. The trap was set. Harrison was scheduled to fly back on Thursday afternoon. On Thursday morning, I picked up my phone and called Florence. I channeled every ounce of acting ability I possessed. I made my voice sound small, defeated, and entirely broken. "Hi, Florence," I whispered into the phone. I have been thinking a lot about what you said at the lunch on Sunday. About me being overwhelmed. I think you are right. I think I need help. Could you come over this morning? Just you and me? I want to talk about the baby." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her ego inflating. She thought I was finally surrendering. She thought she had broken me down completely, and I was ready to hand over the reins. "Of course, Claire, sweetheart," she purred, her voice dripping with triumphant satisfaction. "I will be right there. I only want what is best for the family." "I know," I said softly. "See you soon." I hung up the phone and texted Harrison. I used our pre-agreed emergency code word. Come straight home from the airport immediately. Do not go to the office. Emergency. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, I stood in my kitchen and waited. I heard her car pull into the driveway. I heard the click of her heels on the porch. And then I heard it. Click. Beep, beep, beep. It was the glorious sound of my smart lock rejecting her old brass key. I watched the live camera feed on my phone. Florence stood on the porch, staring at her key in utter confusion. She pulled it out, shoved it back in, and tried to turn it again. Beep, beep, beep. Access denied. A flash of genuine annoyance crossed her face. She reached out and pressed the doorbell. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and walked to the front door. I pulled it open slowly, greeting her with a calm, serene smile. "Oh, hi Florence," I said pleasantly. "Sorry about that. I updated the locks yesterday. You know, for safety." Her eyes flickered, analyzing my face. The defeated woman she spoke to on the phone was nowhere to be found. She stepped inside, immediately scanning the hallway. It was completely spotless. The air smelled like fresh lemon cleaner. She noticed the small black dome camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. She paused, her posture stiffening. "Cameras, Claire?" she asked, her voice losing its sweet edge. "Just taking the baby's security very seriously," I replied, gesturing toward the living room. "Please have a seat. We have a lot to talk about." We sat down at the dining table, the same table where she had tried to publicly execute me just 4 days prior. I didn't offer her coffee. I didn't offer her water. I simply reached under the table and pulled out the bright red binder, sliding it across the polished wood until it rested directly in front of her. "I have been thinking about your concerns regarding my mental health and Finn's environment," I began, my voice incredibly steady. "So, I took action. In that binder, you will find a signed assessment from Finn's pediatrician confirming he is in perfect health and living in a flawless environment. Behind that is a certified psychological evaluation from a licensed clinician, clearing me of any postpartum depression, psychosis, or instability." Florence didn't touch the binder. She just stared at me, the color slowly draining from her face. "I don't know what you were trying to prove, Claire. I only wanted to help." "No, you didn't," I said coldly. I picked up the TV remote and pressed a button. The large flat screen in the living room powered on. I had synced my phone to the display. Suddenly, the screen showed crisp, high-definition security footage from 2 days ago. It was Florence. She was walking into my empty living room. The video showed her opening my mail on the counter. It showed her taking out her phone, moving a pile of Finn's toys into a messy heap, and snapping a photo of it. Timestamped. Dated. Undeniable. "You recorded me in my own son's house?" Florence hissed, her composure finally shattering. She looked furious, but underneath the anger, I saw fear. Just then, the front door unlocked with the correct digital code. Harrison rushed into the hallway, dropping his suitcase, looking panicked. He ran into the living room, freezing when he saw the TV screen playing a loop of his mother staging a mess in our kitchen. He looked at the TV, then at the red binder, and finally at me. "What is going on?" Harrison asked, his voice shaking. Florence stood up fast. "Harrison, your wife has lost her mind. She has cameras everywhere. She is acting like a paranoid lunatic." "Actually," I interrupted, my voice slicing through the room like a blade. "I am just being thorough." I picked up my phone and swiped to the final piece of evidence. I cast it to the TV screen. The security footage vanished, replaced by a giant, blown-up image of the draft email she had written to the family lawyer. The words "custody consultation" and "unfit mother" glowed brightly against the screen. Harrison read the screen. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. The color drained from his face. The illusion of his well-meaning mother shattered instantly. He turned slowly to look at Florence. "Mom, you were going to sue us for custody? You were trying to take Finn away." Harrison's voice broke. For the first time in his life, he didn't look for an excuse. There was no "that is just Mom" left to say. Florence stammered, her regal posture collapsing. I was protecting my grandson. She is disorganized, Harrison. She is not fit. Get out, Harrison said. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, guttural command. I stood up, sliding a final, single piece of paper across the table. It was a formal, legally drafted trespass notice. If you ever set foot on this property again, if you ever contact my son's pediatrician again, or if you ever attempt to interfere with my family, I will hand this entire binder, the videos, and your email over to the police for harassment, I said calmly. Your key doesn't work anymore. And neither do your lies. Get out of my house. Florence grabbed her purse. She looked at Harrison, waiting for him to save her. But he just pointed at the door, tears standing in his eyes. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking rapidly in retreat. When the door clicked shut, the silence in the house was deafening. Harrison fell to his knees in the middle of the living room, sobbing, begging for my forgiveness, apologizing for being so blind. But as I looked down at him, I didn't feel relief. I just felt tired. Julian eventually apologized and begged for my forgiveness on his knees, crying about how he was blind to her manipulation. But looking at him now, I can only see the man who stood by silently eating dessert while his mother tried to take my son away. So, Reddit, tell me, am I wrong for silently meeting with a divorce lawyer today, even though he finally stood up to her at the very end? Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell so you never miss a daily drama story from us. Drop your verdict in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.